Ladies and gentlemen, it is lightning round. It is Kevin Tompkins. It is Britt Flinn. It is Andrew. No, it's not. You look a lot better today. Not Andrew Cooper, but Howard Bender. Howard, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for I'm sorry. Am I supposed to be Andrew Cooper today? Let me just put the hat on backwards.
Well, you need the sunglasses too
to
kind of
all right.
the
Yeah,
motif.
I'm sorry.
Hey, it happens.
No, hey, what's up?
That's the best Coop impression I've ever seen.
I'm from Boston. How you doing? I love the Patriots.
Oh.
Who wants to fight?
Well, you're already better than Coop, so I think we might keep you on here. But joining us today, a man that is probably on the clock in more underdog slow drafts than anybody walking this planet right now. You know him from Ship Chasing, from ADP Chasing, from Legendary Upside, the winner of Best Ball Mania 3, Mr. Pat Kerrane. Pat, my friend, how are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Can't complain.
Yeah. I think, I made a meme about you before meeting you saying Pat Kerrane drafted Treylon Burks in best ball. So I drafted Treylon Burks in best ball.
I'm still drafting him.
So am I, baby. Love to see it.
You popped up into the stream and I was like, oh damn, I gotta pull up my slow draft windows now and make sure I'm not timing out anywhere. So
that's nice to know. I'm a reminder for everyone that you're probably on the clock somewhere.
You just see the Pat Kerrane face, and it's just an automatic pivot into your phone screen. But no, wanted to get you on for a long time here, Pat. Definitely, excited to have you here talking about wide receivers today. Let's just jump right into it here. Talking about wide receivers. So, before we actually get into the player takes and everything like that, I just think it's funnily important here to talk about wide receivers and from a roster construction standpoint, because the ADP and because kind of the draft landscape is much different this year than in previous years, because the biggest prevailing narrative seems to be wide receiver dead zone this year rather than the RB dead zone. So I'm prioritizing myself, trying to get as many wide receivers in that, so to speak, wide receiver window before it really dries up. So I know, Pat, you can kind of attest to that and how important grabbing a bunch of wide receivers is in this specific landscape.
Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting year because Underdog's leading the charge on the wide receiver ADP, but it's a half PPR site, and you can go over to DraftKings and try to you can scoop up your wide receivers there much more easily. Some guys are going a round or later, behind their Underdog ADP on DraftKings, a full PPR site. And then some of the other sites like FFPC and FFC, they're also PPR, and you can get wide receivers later over there. So it's just pretty interesting because it's not the scoring system that's driving the Underdog ADP. It's like the drafters just happen to be kind of there's a lot of wide receiver drafters on Underdog. But I think it does create a situation where it's not that you necessarily have to hammer wide receiver in the early rounds, but I do think you're in really rough shape if you get locked out of those first few tiers of wide receiver. Once you get into really the 9th round, mid 8th, it starts to get really tough at wide receiver, and it's tough to see how you gain ground if you don't have enough firepower already.
And it's different too, though, right? Between best ball and redraft, because in best ball, you can kind of go after some of those guys who are going to have spike weeks, and you don't have to worry about putting them in your lineup and figuring out who to take out and who to put in. So best ball, I think it's a little bit, honestly, less important than it is in redraft, but it also depends on your format and your drafting strategy as well. Because I know Howard likes to have a solid couple running backs. I like to do an anchor running back situation. I think there is a decent amount of value on the board in those later rounds for wide receivers. So I don't think you necessarily have to just hammer them all early.
Yeah, traditionally for me, I've been grabbing, for best ball, because like Britt said, you don't have to set the lineup. So you can play a little bit of wide receiver roulette. Now, I'm not saying you ignore the top tier of wide receivers, because, it's almost for me, it's like an anchor wide receiver method in best ball. I like to have one or two of the strong guys, but I always find that I build my best ball teams with running backs early and grab those, because I can load up on wide receivers. I can get 8 or 9 wide receivers by the end of the draft. And even though you're, whether you're starting 2 or even if you're starting 3 with a flex, you only need a few guys to really pop in a given week. You don't have to worry about, who you're using and things like that. In redraft contrary, it's kind of funny because, we just saw that whole rash of FSGA drafts, which are, all the industry people and where are you going? And I was expecting to see a whole bunch of like heavy wide receiver runs there, but there were like 2 people in a 14 teamer who were heavy wide receiver, but everybody just kept going back to the running back. So, I thought, for best ball, I'll anchor wide receiver and then play receiver roulette later on. But now with everybody, still like in the industry leagues, at least, still grabbing those running backs, I've found that I'm more wide receiver heavy in redrafts early on than I usually am.
Yeah, I think this year offers some real value at the running back position, especially in round 3. Like I really like Breece Hall. I think he has a ton of upside. Obviously, you have risk there with the ACL tear and the potential for Dalvin Cook to sign there. But I'm kind of wading into that risky situation because I think he's really, really talented and things could break his way in a massive way that his 3rd round ADP just does not reflect. Like that upside's not fully baked in there at all. But there's other guys, that you can get, like if Josh Jacobs isn't holding out, he's not going to be a late 3rd round pick for much longer. So I'm trying to figure out how to get some of that value while also not getting locked out at wide receiver. Tight end, the elite tight ends are also going much later than last year. That's another thing I want to be trying to take advantage of. I've been using Hayden Wink's golden rule that he came up with, looking at previous year's data, that is just 4 wide receivers through round 7. So that's been kind of like the rule of thumb that I've been trying to keep in mind for most of these drafts, because if you go, like I'll do 5 sometimes if I don't have any wide receivers early, but like through the first 2 rounds, but if you just do 4 in most of your drafts, that gives you 3 detours away from the wide receiver position, and you can try to scoop that value. So I'm trying to be pretty choosy about when I don't take a wide receiver early on, but at some point I think you definitely want to, because there are values at the other position this year.
Where do you, just out of curiosity, Pat, where do you, when you deviate from that plan, you go to the deviate from the wide receiver position, do you find yourself sticking with running backs? Do you try to grab like a Hawkinson if you don't get a Travis Kelce to start things off? Or, where do you usually tend to lean with 4 wide receivers in your first 7 picks?
Yeah, it's usually running back's the easiest one, because if you're in the if you're at the middle of the board, to me, like you can get Jonathan Taylor in the mid to late 2nd round. Like that feels like a smash in a half PPR format. Like, this is the guy we were taking 101 last year. The offense could be much more functional. He's extremely talented. He's in his prime. So, he's someone I deviate away from the wide receiver position for a fair amount. And then that 3rd round, I take a lot of the running backs there. I also really like Mark Andrews this year. I also will take the elite quarterbacks in the 3rd round. It's not something I was hammering early on, but I'm just starting to feel like this isn't changing. I don't think these ADPs are falling. So I am just kind of, if enough of the guys that I like are off the board, I'll try to mix in the elite quarterbacks in the 3rd round there. I also like Lamar Jackson a lot at the 3-4 turn. So he's someone that I'll often take a detour for there. But then, when you get to I'm not taking a ton of Hawkinson because he tends to go in the early 5th, and I can get Pitts and Goddard at the following turn, at that 6-7 turn a lot of the time. So I'm actually not as heavy on Hawkinson specifically, but I do like trying to mix in those later elite tight ends in the 5 or the 6-7 range. I also take Goddard in the late 7th as well.
Yeah, that 3rd round is usually where I'm looking to pivot, because that group of wide receivers you're talking about, once the Olave, Higgins, Devonta Smith tier dries up, you're really kind of in a dead zone, because it seems like DK Metcalf's kind of in a tier of his own. That's like the bridge to the next, the Keenan Allens, the Amari Coopers, that kind of tier.
Right.
So I don't feel great about making a wide receiver selection. So yeah, the Mark Andrews, and then you could even take the quarterbacks, Hurts, Mahomes, one of those guys. But kind of going toward like where you're drafting. So like 101, it's Jefferson by consensus, but you can make cases for, I think, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Howard. I know Jamar Chase is your 101, kind of deviating away from Jefferson. So your thoughts on, taking Chase over Jefferson there?
I mean, listen, I think we're splitting hairs right now. I always like the guy on the way up, and I think Jefferson can kind of plateau with where he is. I think one of the things that we have to take a look at with regard to Minnesota is obviously, are we putting our trust in Kirk Cousins once again? Number two, you bring in Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, and maybe all of a sudden, I mean, I don't love the defense anyway still, but maybe all of a sudden, not every game turns into a massive shootout at the end. You've got Jordan Addison, a rookie, supposed to be replacing Adam Thielen. Hawkinson will be a strong target, but there's really, it's Jefferson, and he's going to be the focal point of every defense. You can't do that against Cincinnati. You can try to, but T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, I'm not bullish on Irv Smith, but with Higgins and Boyd, maybe they throw in a couple of minor guys there, but you've got such strength at the wide receiver position that you can't, what you end up doing is you start putting your top corner on Higgins, so that way you can float safety help over the top against Chase, but you could still on a shorter route, I'll take Chase as the for contested catches all the time. So it's a better quarterback. It's still a very pass-friendly system in Cincinnati, and I think that Burrow Chase connection that we have, it just continues to develop. And so yeah, I think that he's going to be the guy who's going to pop the most this year.
I want to hear Pat's thoughts next, because this 101 debate has been really spicy. So if you're in the 101, who's been your guy?
Jefferson.
Boots.
Boo. The other thing I would say, I think the thing is, if we're doing a bunch of drafts, like how locked in is the 101, in a given year is important, I think. And this year it's super locked in. Like if you're at the 102, Jefferson's going to go ahead of you almost every single time. And so I'm doing a ton of these drafts. I mean, I'll just take Chase when I have the 102, which is going to be a 12th of the time, and get plenty of Chase. He also really never falls. So I don't think anyone's in, like, I'm not interested in anyone but Chase at the 102 either. Obviously Chase is awesome. But Jefferson's really in a situation where it's just all going to flow through him again. Even with Addison there and Hawkinson there, like as a rookie, I think Addison profiles is good enough to help keep defenses honest. But, the play caller series that Jordan Rodriguez put together for The Athletic was so good. But one of the little nuggets in there was that they had, kind of taken the RAM system to Minnesota. They're like, well, we want to use Jefferson in this role, but that's kind of like the Robert Woods spot. And, we want to use him here, but that's the Cooper Kupp spot. So they created a bunch of different formations to just make Justin Jefferson the guy for everything, so the entire offense is literally designed around him. That could maybe change as Addison comes on. But that's probably a 2024 thing. So I'm just banking Jefferson right now.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at with Jefferson. I mean, I'm still taking him at 101. Chase is locked in at 102. I think 103 is where he can kind of make the most kind of fork in the road there when you're talking about Kupp and Tyreek Hill and, CMC, however you want to kind of play that. But I'm taking Cooper Kupp anytime if he's there after 103. And I think just from where you're picking standpoint, 101 is one of my you're getting Jefferson, but I hate usually what falls there, because you have to make a decision. If there's no running back faller, if T. Higgins goes a pick or two before you have to make a decision with how it is now. I mean, we got word about the Saquon Barkley getting that contract, so maybe that introduces another option in there. But you're talking about Ramondre. Josh Jacobs is a holdout risk. We know Ramondre with the Patriots they've been looking to get a running back in there for how long now? They brought in Fournette for a workout. So I think that's pretty interesting to take some of that upside off of Ramondre. So he's not the best click there. Then you got to worry about, DK Metcalf. Do you take a naked quarterback there with Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, whoever your favorite is there? So that's why I don't really like I'll take Jefferson. And obviously if I have 101, it is what it is. But I much prefer to have the kind of the 103, 104 where I can get a cup. If I want to take an Olave or Devontae Smith, I have that option. If I want to take a falling running back like a Jonathan Taylor, I can do that too. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as 101's fine. But if I have my choice, I'm taking 103 or 104 because more than likely I can get cup and then at least get an option I really like coming back.
Yeah, the 101's been tough for sure. You can find yourself in a tough spot if the wide receivers go. Like I don't love Christian Kirk, Brandon Ayuk's fine, but sometimes at the 4-5 turn, those two are like the only guys left at wide receiver. So if you go Jefferson, running back, which is something I'm very comfortable doing, but then it's like if the room it doesn't cooperate, I don't love my wide receiver 2 and my wide receiver 3, and that's when I start already to get worried. Like, can I recover from this? And it gets tough if you feel like you don't have enough wide receiver firepower through those first 5 rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one guy that I've been talking about where I don't feel like he's been a first round pick, and I think that it's actually reflected in the ADP. Obviously, he's going in the second round now. Per that is Davante Adams. Pat, your thoughts about at least him, how that kind of meshes with Garoppolo? Because we know Davante Adams just a obviously elite target earner. We know he shouldn't have problems as far as getting at least 160, 170, 180 targets. But getting those from Jimmy Garoppolo, possibly somebody else, if he's either not ready to start the season or, something happens. Like, how are you feeling about Davante Adams, especially compared to the guys that we certainly like in that range with Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Yeah, it's tough because I want to be taking even more of them, but I don't want to be light on those second-year guys, and Waddle I like too. So it's tough not to, Amon-Ra's great too. So there's lots of guys that I want to be high on there, but I have made a point to try to stay consistently overweight on Davante Adams because he's still really good. Like and also he almost was the guy you needed in week 17 last year with Jarrett Stidham. So I feel
that
like
49ers game, I had to sweat the Kings Classic on that game alone against Fantasy Mojo. Because he had McCaffrey, Jacobs, and Adams, having to sweat that trio in that game. Like Jared Stidham picked a great game to absolutely ball out and make me sweat.
Yeah, so obviously I don't love the Raiders situation this year, and it's kind of easy to see like the bottom falling out. I was talking to Ben Gretsch as we were contemplating a main event pick, and he's like, dude, this could get really ugly. Like we could be talking about Adams as a trade candidate. McDaniels is fired. Like this, it doesn't feel great when you look at Las Vegas, but he's still really, really good. And you're getting him now in the second round. He gets open at a high rate still. He earns targets at a super high rate. The offense was built around him last year. They kind of demoted Darren Waller in a way, just made him like this field stretcher. So I'm still in on Davante Adams.
See, my deal with Adams is that I'm still concerned because, for one, even though Jimmy Garoppolo is cleared for camp, the coach speak that came out today said that he'll be treated as any other player is treated coming off injury. So, like, just how much he's going to get in training camp is still TBD. And with Josh Jacobs potentially holding out, you're not going to have that same balanced offensive attack and volume that Davante Adams saw last year, because Garoppolo isn't going to be able to target Adams if he's on his ass. And let's be real, the interior of that offensive line is weak, and it's not going to be nice going against Joey Bosa, Chris Jones, Frank Clark, et cetera, twice a year on all three of those teams. I don't doubt Adams' talent, but his situation really scares me because I doubt that team.
I think that the key component is that interior of the offensive line. If the guards can hold it together, I don't hate the group that's there, especially when you're talking about a guy like Jimmy G, who knows what McDaniels wants to do. He knows the verbiage of this offensive scheme. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, what we're looking at, what McDaniels is building, because everybody kind of makes fun of, well, you got Hunter Renfrow and you got Jacoby Myers. It's like you've got all of these interchangeable cogs. It's exactly what you had back when the Patriots were running Randy Moss out there, and they had these interchangeable cogs at tight end and wide receiver that it didn't really matter. You still knew that focus was, Randy Moss downfield. And so when you look at the way that everything's kind of set up in there, I think one of the things, obviously Davante Adams coming out and saying that he didn't like what the offense looks like or anything, in that fashion. I think that, once he starts to realize that he is actually a focal point of this passing attack, and Jimmy G's, he's fine with like a 2-3 step drop and a quick release. I mean, we've seen him, pull that off. So I'm less concerned about that aspect. And then, of course, I mean, listen, yes, Brian Hoyer as a backup is not somebody who you want to invest in, but at least you're also still talking about somebody who is extremely familiar with this system, who is extremely familiar with the verbiage at the line, and is extremely, experienced in the sense that, because what McDaniels likes to do is not only does his quarterback read the defense and make some decisions based on that, but his wide receivers do as well. And that's kind of what confused everybody last year a lot, was that his wide receivers, he wants them to do a read as well on the defense and possibly alter their routes as well. So, the quarterback now needs to understand that what's he seeing there. So he needs to be locked in with his receivers. I think if Jimmy G and Davante Adams stay on the same page, okay, if this is what you're seeing, do this. If this is what you're seeing, do that. I think it's definitely something that can blend well. And if I'm getting Davante Adams, like let's say I've got that 10 or 11 pick in the draft, and I grab, somebody, who I like up top, whether it's a running back or a wide receiver, coming back around a couple of picks into that second round. If I can get an elite guy like Davante Adams, I mean, I'll happily jump at that chance.
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting kind of between Garoppolo. I mean, we look at what he did last year. He had 1 touchdown of over 20 plus air yards, and Adams had 9 by himself with, Derek Carr and Stidham. So I think something kind of has to give there if it is going to be Garoppolo most of the time with the Raiders. So, and yeah, like Pat said, like Gretch said, that could be something that the Raiders just absolutely bottom out. Davante Adams is sick of it. Not the bill of goods I signed up for, so get me out of here. We know Adams has been vocal, so it's definitely an interesting kind of dichotomy there. But we talked about the second year wide receivers, and we can kind of pivot to that a little bit. Maybe go a little bit deeper into the ADP, going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. So Pat, if you're looking at these second year wide receivers, and I know we like to talk about who are guys that we think could be second round, maybe a back end 1st round pick next year, to kind of describe these second year wide receivers that could be more premium picks. Who are you kind of thinking as far as maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th, even 6th round guys that can make that leap that you're hyper targeting, or maybe just targeting more often in the field?
I'm very tempted to steal Howard's selection here, but I'll say
take him. No. Go ahead, take him.
I'll say Traylon Burks. I'm still in on
bum.
I'm still in on post. They signed Hopkins, which definitely takes some of the upside, I think, off the table. But I think it also tightens his range of outcomes, where previously to the Hopkins signing, like, we didn't know what their plan was for the season in any real way. Like, this could be a Will Levis tanking experience. It's not that, right? We know that now. You don't sign DeAndre Hopkins if you're planning to give Will Levis a big chunk of time. We've also heard stuff like Levis is behind Malik Willis right now. So it's made me more confident that we're getting a Ryan Tannehill season, at least for the vast majority of the season. Traylon Burks has been kind of maligned in terms of his actual talent on the field last year. Like, I thought he was pretty good. He rated well in open score, which is something that was like a major red flag for a lot of the film evaluators coming out. His ability to actually get open as a traditional wide receiver. If you check out Matt Harmon's reception perception profile on Burks, he wasn't particularly enthused about Burks, but he did note that he was playing a traditional X wide receiver role. He wasn't in kind of a gadgety role, which he was projected as, potentially being that kind of wide receiver coming out. But he was a traditional X, and he got open at a pretty high rate. He rated wide receiver 28 last year in open score. So, not elite or anything, but very solid. I've had guys like Devontae Smith, ahead of Michael Pittman, ahead of Keenan Allen. So I thought he actually showed pretty well as a rookie. If this offense is going to be functional, then I'm definitely interested in him, especially if he's going to be available at that 7-8 turn area. I was pretty heavy on him at the 6-7 turn, but the Hopkins signing makes me want to get a bit of a discount from there. But I'm still going to be drafting him in the mid to late 7th.
You can't hunt hogs if you can't get open. Just saying.
That's right.
All this Arkansas stuff. Come on.
I know, right? That's low hanging fruit here for Britt. With the Arkansas stuff. Britt, who is your kind of second round breakout here as far as guys you think that can come up and be premium picks next year?
My guy's actually Jahan Dotson. We saw last year that he has a nose for the end zone, and I've been very open about being concerned about Sam Howell, but I personally think that he's going to be replaced by Jacoby Brissett, and everything's going to be all right in the world. I think Dotson is better suited for Howell's skill set than a deeper threat like Terry McLaurin. His route running ability is stellar. Again, we're bringing up reception perception, but if you've seen his success on his routes, I mean, there's green everywhere. Might as well be St. Patrick's Day. He can be a deep threat, but I can see a lot of slants and curls to him from Sam Howell on those short A-dot routes. And he ranked 27th in target separation last year as a rookie. And I think he's only going to get better. As a team that's likely going to be playing from behind, as the Commanders should be, let's be realistic, they're going to have to pass the ball. And I really like Dotson as a value going off the board as wide receiver 40 at an aggregate ADP.
I'm going to go with, should I just go, Kev? Should I?
Go ahead.
I mean, does anybody have any comments on Jahan Dotson? I mean, I got Sam Howell's mom who just texted me saying, tell that Brit girl to shut up. Jacoby Brissett is dead to her. So I don't know.
I have no comments on the Jacoby Brissett slander. I'm I guess indifferent on that, but his Dotson's last 4 games, certainly is a nice kind of has some momentum going into this season. I think you have to either believe in Howell or, just kind of believe in that offensive environment being upgraded because, they brought in Eric Bieniemy now. We'll see. This year they don't hate Antonio Gibson as much. We haven't seen much of that narrative this year, I guess, which is a good thing for the offensive environment. But, certainly running, last 4 games, he ran at least like 90% or close to 90% of the routes each game. I think, let me look at your target shares. Yeah, over 20%. Targets per out run close to about 22% in those last 4 games. So certainly a market improvement. I think if you can get, him and Terry McLaurin going, that's going to be great for either Howell or Brissett, whoever it is. But, that's certainly an upside stab that I like taking at the end of that wide receiver group when you're having to sort out between Quentin Johnston and Courtland Sutton and all those guys. So I'd much rather take the stab on Dotson there.
All right. For me, the second year player who I'm obviously eyeballing is definitely Drake London. I mean, featured wide receiver 1 in this offense. Kyle Pitts is the number 2 targeted pass catcher there. Listen, this is all about Arthur Smith's desire to run the football excessively. You're going to see a ton of Bijan Robinson, probably even splash in some Tyler Algier late in the games if he wants to keep Bijan a little fresh and a little healthy there. It just depends on what's going on there. But what I like about it is because everybody is going to be so focused on the Falcons running the football that, maybe that does kind of open things up a little bit more for the passing game. I don't love Desmond Ridder, but I think he can be passable. He's got a little bit of mobility to him that, and I like this Falcons offensive line. So I think he will have that protection. So I think that, if they are really gonna run more RPO in this offense, which is what they're talking about, I think we're gonna see a surprisingly strong number of times that Ritter throws the ball as opposed to dishing it off to the backfield. And I think that Drake London is just gonna be in a prime spot. Let's also not forget that, I mean, even just the secondaries within the division. And then you look at the secondaries that are in the AFC South as well, because that's where they play a lot of their out of conference games. I think it's a really nice spot with so much focus on that ground game in Atlanta. I think this actually helps Drake London and even Kyle Pitts to a certain extent kind of blossom.
Yeah, Pat, I know you said that he was one of your guys. What are your thoughts as far as Drake London? I think that's really a bet on the upgraded efficiency of the offense, because it's going to have to be. I mean, for me, I would much rather take Kyle Pitts a little bit later, just because he plays tight end. You're still making that efficiency bet. With that, you don't have to take Drake London a round or two. You don't have to take him before Pitts. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. I have much more Pitts than I do London, but certainly get the bet there. So what do you think about London?
I'm taking them both. I think this offense is going to be extremely concentrated to those two guys. I think they also kind of do different things. Pitts is really interesting as like a downfield wide receiver playing tight end, right? That's kind of what he offers, but he's not. I don't know if he's going to be like a big time separator. He's kind of like this. He's like a big bodied wide receiver. I don't know. He's like close-ish to like if T. Higgins had tight end eligibility. I mean, I think that's sort of the archetype of guy that he is. Mike Williams-ish, yeah. But London was getting open at a pretty high rate last year. And, if you're thinking about that RPO stuff, like Ben Gretsch has also pointed out, like if you're looking at the RPO stuff, like that's going to be a situation where you're going to your first read a lot more, because you're like literally just like reading the defense and then getting the ball out. London is going to be the guy I think who benefits the most from that. If we just get passing attempts here, I think we could start to feel pretty differently about this offense compared to last year. Like they were so historically run heavy, so obstinate in the face of like game scripts that called for passing. They just refused to do it. Yep. And that could change, where they're just like willing to pass like a team that is just normally run heavy, kind of like the Titans have been in years past, like not crazy run heavy. And so, yeah, I think London, just given the fact that he's a first round pick who flashed immediately, had a really strong target share, strong targets per out run, ability to get open, delivered on the prospect profile that we're looking for. Like he looks like that intermediate winner that we thought he would be. So I like Pitts a lot, but I don't want to be sleeping on London just because Pitts is underpriced.
And I feel like some of that obstinance and aversion to passing was because of Mariota, because we saw when Ritter came in there, London averaged 83.5 receiving yards per game over that 4-game span. Granted, it's not a big sample size and Kyle Pitts wasn't there, but that still would have put him at 8th in the entire league had it been season long. So there's definitely upside there with that connection between Ritter and London.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, looking at pass rate over expected, like the Falcons in the season were minus 13.7, like they were still second to the Bears, but we're talking about two offenses that just flat out refuse to do it. I think since the 2009 Jets, to just so running the ball into the Paleozoic era. Like we'll see if that's really if it was a Mariota thing or if it's like Arthur Smith just wanting to keep his head down. With this Falcons offense. My guy, Christian Watson, I feel like, we're talking about just an athletic freak, 6'5", 215. And then this offense is pretty ambiguous with, there's not a lot of depth. I mean, we know it's really Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, brought in Jaden Reed in the draft, obviously brought in Luke Musgrave, brought in Tucker Kraft. We know that Watson, certainly made his bones last year with a lot of touchdowns, and those touchdowns are likely to come down as far as the rate of which he scored. But, we'll see if the ADOT comes down. I think he had about a 13.5-yard ADOT last year. If that comes down a little bit, into kind of maybe 11, 12 range, maybe even lower, just some target earning ability. Because when I look at this Green Bay offense, I don't see a lot of target earning potential within any of these guys. So I feel like Christian Watson definitely has a leg up there. And a lot of it's going to depend on Jordan Love too, because we have to see with Jordan Love, is he going to be the guy? Is he going to be able to get the ball to these guys? Because if he doesn't, we know Green Bay probably has an out to drafting somebody next year and then trying to figure out the quarterback position. But at least for this year, I think you have to just believe a little bit in Jordan Love and being able to either hit on the deep shots of Christian Watson or a combination of that plus target earning ability. So I think he's the best equipped to be able to take that next step forward as far as Green Bay goes. And, I'm certainly a fan. The price is not the greatest, but with that profile, I will certainly take my stabs at him. What are your thoughts on Watson, Pat?
I've had trouble getting on board at this ADP. Like compared to London, I just think like as good as Watson was last year, it was on a smaller sample. It relied on splash plays from a different quarterback. This is a team that I could see moving in the wrong direction in terms of play volume and passing attempts. Right? They could be going pretty run heavy, in an attempt to hide Jordan Love and try to create like a high efficiency passing game that's sort of playing off the running game. They've got two quality running backs. They've already been slow under LaFleur with Rodgers. So now we could be slow and run heavy. And Watson can survive in an environment like that because he is that splash play guy. But the narrative that we're getting out of training camp right now is how much Jordan Love loves Romeo Doubs. So I'm just like, man, I'm sitting there looking at Drake London, who is like a much better prospect, had the better draft capital, 3-year guy from a bigger program. Watson was kind of a bet on athleticism, and that bet seems to have hit in a pretty big way, but I'm still just like not quite as confident in the player. And then the situation is starting to feel like pretty similar. So I've just been betting on London there, especially like if I need the wide receiver, like if I have 2 wide receivers and I'm taking my wide receiver 3, that's a spot where I'm like, all right, let me take Watson here and get some exposure. But if I'm taking my second wide receiver, I'm often just like, target share is definitely going to be going my way here if I take London.
Yeah, I think situation is definitely the key here because, we're going to see LaFleur's offense in Green Bay in its purest form. How many times did Aaron Rodgers just change the play at the line of scrimmage? How many times did you see Aaron Rodgers like shoving A.J. Dillon off the field because he wanted Aaron Jones on the field with him? And I think that's going to be a very key thing. And the reason that you see Love and Doubs gelling the way they are right now is that I think Dobbs is a cleaner route runner than Christian Watson. Like Christian Watson does have that splash factor. He's got that great, the speed to take it downfield and stretch that defense. But this offense is predicated on the run setting up the pass. And when you do sit there and light up the pass as much as you do, it's the short dink and dunk down the field, West Coast style of passing, which seems to be favoring Dobbs in a much stronger way. So, at this ADP price, I haven't gotten in any draft. I think maybe 1 share of Christian Watson, because it was just where I was in the draft. It wasn't even about like him falling in value or anything like that. So, I worry about the situation going on in Green Bay just because of what LaFleur is going to want to do. Because, now that Aaron Rodgers is there, LaFleur is going to be like, oh, it's my offense and what I say goes. And he's going to try and run a tight ship like that.
Yep. And I'll save my retort against Christian Watson for later on when I talk about Dubs.
Yeah. Remember, I'm boots on the ground here. So, I have some say in that, some pull. But let's talk about some of the older wide receivers. I don't want to call them old. They're not all old, but in terms of the young, sexy group of wide receivers we just talked about, maybe they are. But the guys, once we get a little bit deeper, we're into the second, into the third round, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper, guys that have finished as wide receiver ones in the past, maybe guys that are going in the wrong direction as far as where we're drafting them. Pat, who are you? Are those like older receivers? Who are you like completely out on? You don't want to touch them unless they're like just a massive faller.
Well, I'm not completely out on Amari Cooper, but I've had trouble getting on board with him where he's going. Um, it just feels like I would say in general that like pocket of the draft is a tough spot for wide receiver because it's not that I don't like Amari Cooper. It's that I feel like what's really the difference between Amari Cooper and, some of the guys going at that 4 or 5 turn. It's just a big group of guys. And so, I feel better about, like, honestly, I kind of feel better about like Terry McLaurin than Amari Cooper. But, McLaurin always goes after Cooper. So I have to take some Cooper if I want to not have 0. But he's someone that I'm like comfortable fading at a pretty decent rate because I'm like, I'll go ahead and grab Lamar Jackson, or I'll grab Jahmyr Gibbs, or just kind of go in a different direction. I mean, heck, Josh Jacobs has fallen to the 312 sometimes, so that's a spot where I'm just taking the running back, and I'm going to be underweight Cooper unless he falls more to that mid 4th, where I can just feel more comfortable getting him in a little bit more of a value.
Well, and it seems like Cooper too did better last season with Brissett at quarterback than he did with Deshaun Watson. And I feel like sometimes we might be maybe elevating Deshaun Watson too much because he's going as QB9. And in those 6 games that he played last season, he only averaged 187 yards per game. I mean, that's definitely not great for a guy that you're taking in the late 3rd, early 4th round. So yeah, I could be on that. And as much as I love Amari Cooper, I think that you're right.
Go ahead.
I love Cooper. I think you guys are wrong. I think you guys are terrible. I think this is the worst show I've ever been on.
It's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
No, but I mean, it's like, because, we're picking through wide receivers here where I don't think any of us really want to be, out on any of these guys. So like, if you had to pick one, like for me, it was like, if I had to pick one, it was going to be McLaurin. Thinking about what Eric Bieniemy is going to try and bring over from Kansas City, and will Antonio Gibson get more work in the passing game because Andy Reid loves to throw to his running backs usually. Are we looking at, because of Sam Howell, are we looking at maybe hitting shorter routes or things like that, and how much is the focal point going to be on Terry McLaurin? Like it's that kind of a thing. I think, we're again splitting hairs here. Amari Cooper in that Cleveland offense, Terry McLaurin in the Washington offense. You can kind of go either way on them. So I mean, I'll take Cooper over over McLaurin just because I think I trust the quarterback a little bit more, believe it or not. But again, I think it can go either way here.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote about McLaurin being an early season fade at ADP, and I still very much believe that to be true. So I don't think that you're far off in that section. But Kev, if you were going to say something about McLaurin, you can go, because otherwise I'm going to go into my hate spiel.
Go ahead. I really honestly, I'm kind of indifferent on McLaurin, honestly. He's just kind of a dude that's just there that I'm not clicking a ton. I'd rather have Dotson later. It's probably more of a value thing for me, but who's your guy, Britt?
Man, I'm driving the Debo hate train. I'm conducting it at this point because he's going as wide receiver 16. And aside from his breakout season, he hasn't finished higher than wide receiver 31 in PPR leagues. I don't care if Brandon Ayuk is the wide receiver 2 on the team's official depth chart. He's the team's wide receiver 1. And with all the other receivers going around Debo, he is a trap at his ADP. He's going to be at least 3rd in the team on targets, and I'm not touching him anywhere in that range. He would have to fall so far down, and people are still stuck in that Debo role situation that no longer exists because of Christian McCaffrey, that I have 0 Debo, and I'm not sad about it one bit.
Yeah, I'm struggling to kind of value Debo, like where he's at. Like I have not a lot of Debo, but I have like just enough to kind of float on by. And it kind of floats into my guy, who's Calvin Ridley, who hasn't played a down of football since 2021. You kind of have to spend a premium price on him. And I know the offense is ascending with Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Engram. But he seems like a late season kind of upside play that you have to take at wide receiver 16. Like, I'm just not totally okay with that. Plus he's going to turn 29 at the end of the season too. So, once you like, I know he's probably worked out and everything, but I'm just not having that game experience for almost 2 years. Like, I'm very concerned about taking him at that price. If he was going like where like Deontay Johnson is going, or like a Lockett, like I think I'd be certainly more into it, but having to spend, after DK Metcalf, it's like Calvin Ridley and Amari Cooper. Like, that's just, I'm not taking wide receivers there. I'm taking the detour, whether it's Mark Andrews or a quarterback or a falling running back. It's just not an attractive price for me to be able to scoop up Calvin Ridley. I'll take him in the 4th if I have to, but not feeling it. What do you think, Pat?
I've also struggled to get on board with Ridley. He goes so early. Like, yeah. I get it on some level because I think he can pay that off. I don't think Christian Kirk is that great. Christian Kirk's
too thin of a bet for me.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, I get it. I could see it paying off. So I don't want to be out on him, but it's just like sometimes you're having to take him over, a guy like Breece Hall, or Josh Jacobs, or Mark Andrews, like, or even one of the falling quarterbacks. Like, I don't know. That's really, really rich to me. Like, if I'm getting him after the tier break at those other positions, okay. I do want to mix him in at that price, even though late third still does feel a little bit rich, given the context around, he just hasn't played. So that's the struggle for me. But it's kind of in the Amari zone where I'm trying to get some exposure. And I think he probably has higher upside because, like last year we were thinking, I was starting to think of like Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, almost like a 1A, 1B, and if you're a 1A competing with Zay Jones, like, you could get someone else to come in and take your job. You take your targets away pretty easily. And Ridley was quite good before, 2 years ago when he didn't play and then he got suspended and everything. So I can see him being a problem if I don't have enough. I'm just having trouble getting enough.
See, I think Ridley's in a good spot. It's tough to invest such a high price in him. It really is. But for the same token, when you're looking at the way this offense is set up, I guess it's not so much for me. Yeah, I do worry about paying too steep a price for a guy who hasn't played ball in 2 years. But for the same token, I guess I'm just a little bit more bullish on the passing attack here. Maybe I'm a little bit more bullish on Christian Kirk than the rest of this room here is, because I think that, if you look at what Kirk's numbers looked like when he was working out of the slot last season, was a lot better than what you saw. So I think when the Jags go into their 2 tight end sets and you've got 2 wide receivers, I think you'll flip-flop a little bit between Kirk and Zay Jones opposite Ridley. But, Peterson's going to want to live in that 3 wide receiver, personnel package. And that's going to put, Ridley's presence is going to put Christian Kirk into the slot, which I just feel is, just better suited for him in that realm. I think it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for teams to, hang out with the coverage. They're going to obviously put guys, heavier coverage on Calvin Ridley, which I think opens things up more for Kirk. So, maybe that's kind of where I'm at with this offense, but just not as down on Kirk as say Pat is right now. Look at
I still take him because they get
smiling. He's like hates him. He's like, I hate Christian Kirk.
I get boxed out of wide receiver enough where I probably pretty close to even with the field on Kirk, but I don't like it. I have 7.5% of Kirk. So the expectations will be 8.3. So I'm not really even fading him. I just hate clicking his name.
That's what, out of like 2,500 best ball drafts that you're going to be doing, 7%.
He's got to put money back in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I'm exactly.
We've talked a lot about the top, few rounds of wide receivers. You guys didn't talk about it on ADP chasing yesterday, so we'll talk about the Giants wide receiver group here. I don't know if I really want to go too in depth in the weeds talk about Cole Beasley, but we're talking about a bunch of Giants wide receivers in the late rounds that you kind of have your stabs, kind of pick who you want out of this group. I think I'm taking more Darius Slayton than anybody, just because I feel like he's almost a lock to be on the field, at least in the beginning, and kind of keep that role. Isaiah Hodgins, we know, is like really the biggest body there. So I think he's kind of insulated as well. And then we're looking at about 37 other slot receivers. And then you add Cole Beasley. So like, is it really just taking the upside stab on Jalen Hyatt, who we know is like falling to the 18th round, on underdog? Is it, Wan'Dale Robinson? Like how are you shaking that out?
Yeah, I mean, I was completely out on Hyatt and pretty out on Wan'Dale Robinson at their previous prices, but now they're falling to the last rounds of drafts, and I'm in there. All right, if I'm just betting on a guy who can hit a spike week at the end of the season for me in best ball, both those guys profile as guys who can do that. And outside of them, I am taking Slayton, but he kind of serves a purpose for me where it's more like I've probably taken one too many rookies, and I'll take Darius Slayton because I think he's going to have a pretty big role to start the year. I'm not sure how much of a role he has down the stretch. I think Jalen Hyatt could kind of come directly at his expense, but I think that, he can kind of help be like a bridge player for me. So I take him on those builds. Isaiah Hodgins is the one I'm most optimistic about. He kind of profiles as the traditional outside wide receiver, a bit of a bigger body guy. Darren Waller's probably like his biggest competition out wide, to be honest. But provided he, they don't play Waller outside too much, I think Hodgins kind of has a pretty big lead on the rest of the competition because, they're all basically slot receivers and burners. And Hodgins is that kind of intermediate guy who can get open. He catches everything. He really catches everything. He's got huge hands as well. Like he's going to be the reliable chain mover guy. I don't think anyone else really profiles as direct competition for that role. Again, outside of Waller a little bit.
Yeah, it's like an elephant graveyard for slot receivers in New York right now. They're just bringing in like every single old slot receiver and just being like, which one of you can be a warm body on the field at any given time? So I think the one who does have the outside ability is going to be the one who wins out. And right now, Hodgins is listed as the wide receiver 1 on the depth chart. Just saying.
I mean, I like Hodgins as the eventual number 1. I mean, what we saw last year. I mean, listen, Darius Slayton got all of that work early on in the season because he went to Daboll and he said, "I want to be on this team. I'll take the pay cut, and just I like what you can build, and let's do that." But as the season went on, Isaiah Hodgins was the guy who stepped in more in that role. So kind of what I'm thinking as far as the way the Giants go, Isaiah Hodgins will be in, on the outside on one side. On the other side, you'll probably see a mix of Slayton and Hyatt until Hyatt can, really prove himself at that level. And then when you're looking at the slot, I just have this horrible, horrible feeling it's going to be Sterling Shepard, who nobody likes and nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to draft either. But I mean, if you're looking at this, horrendous wide receiver room on this team, I think that, Hodgins, Hyatt / Slayton with Shepard in the slot is really kind of where things are pointing, especially with the fact that Wan'Dale Robinson not going to be ready early on in the season. I'm not sure what he's going to be able to do, and maybe he comes in for the second half and maybe he sort of supplants Shepard at that point. But I mean, that's kind of where I see things rolling for the G-men.
Yeah, I mean, they were pretty much holding open tryouts last year in the middle of the season where they had guys like Marcus Johnson and David Sills running routes. And then Buffalo released Hodgins. They picked them up. Richie James was there, and they ended up kind of transitioning into getting their 3 guys of Richie James, Slayton, and Hodgins. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, Hodgins, I think, is pretty insulated in that offense as far as what he does and what his role is going to be. And then it's almost anybody's guess, but the best part about with best ball is you have your pick of, it's pretty much build dependent. If you load it up on rookies in the late, middle rounds, Slayton, or even like a dart throw on Sterling Shepard, I guess, would kind of be the option there versus taking a Hyatt versus Wan'Dale Robinson as well. But Before I know we're kind of up against it here. Let's talk Howard. We're doing a lot of stuff here with the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide, the All Pro package. It's a big time here as we're getting into August. Drafts are starting up. A lot of home leagues. So, what better way to get the leg up on everybody than the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide?
There's no better way to get the leg up other than the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. Absolutely. Just to sharing what we've got. I mean, listen, the articles that are already out right now, from you and from Britt, from Coop, John and Pemba, the whole crew. I mean, it's definitely it's top notch. I love the wide receiver work that we've got. We got Britt's wide receiver tiers. We got late round wide receiver calls. We got your 0 RB stuff in there. I'm finishing up. I'm trying to finish up the coaching systems articles that are all in there, and which to me is one of the key things, because if you understand how the offenses are run, then it not only does it just make you a better drafter, but when you're looking for your waiver wire picks during the season, if you know that it's a West Coast timing offense, it's a vertical offense, whatever it is, you have that better idea. So I appreciate you letting me promo that there, Kev. Was there something specific you wanted me to say about it, though?
Nothing specific. Just to go out and get it.
Go out and get it. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft guide. Get right there. And I'll tell you what, I will say this. So for anybody who doesn't know, we had a big business meeting the other day, and they told me they're taking my promo code away. So I tested it this morning. I'm making sure that it's active. If you get the All Pro subscription, promo code Howard on the monthly, right? That gets you 50% off for the first 6 months. So that carries you straight through. It's like less than $20 a month for the football season there. And that's all sport. Like it's not just the football package, it's all sport. So there you go.
Absolutely. We got to get out of here. Pat, thank you so much for hopping on with us to talk wide receivers. Tell everybody real quick where we can find you and what you're up to.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. You can get all my work and get my rankings there. If you sign up for a yearly subscription, I also have $50 underdog credits. You go on the site, right at the top, you fill out a form and get a $50 credit for underdog. Cuts the price basically in half for your first year.
Yep, I've got that. Definitely reading and definitely enjoying everything. Hope to see the walkthrough in there this year as well. We're going to see that in there?
Yep, you will.
Perfect. All right, we got to get out of here. For Britt, for Howard, for Pat Kerrane, I'm Kevin Tompkins. We will see you next week with Pat Fitzmaurice and tight ends. Toodles.